Welcome to Monkey Chatter. Monkey Chatter is a podcast by three great friends who have different perspectives on all things wellness. So let's jump right into today's topic. Guests that we had on our series, and we want to make that a little bit more of a habit this year. So today we have Cindy Reed. Cindy Reed is an amazing person. She's a yoga teacher, which is how I met her. But she's also, she has a master's degree from the University of Kentucky. She's a licensed Kentucky psychotherapist and a yoga instructor and mindfulness guru. She was featured as a lead presenter at the National Association of Social Workers in continuing education conference. She offers workshops on trauma-informed care and mindfulness. In fact, I did my trauma-informed teaching certification for yoga with Cindy, and my daughter and I have been in several of her workshops, and it's amazing to see my 24-year-old daughter using the stuff that she is, learning from Cindy's classes. So, in yay, Samantha. In 2019, Cindy was honored with the Innovative Program of the Year award by the Kentucky Association of Sexual Assault Programs for the development of trauma-informed yoga programming across the whole state. Kudos. And she's a founding member of the BE Project, a mindfulness schools initiative. She was named a game changer, quotes, air quotes, and one of the women you have to meet in Clark County, which is the county that she lives in. And that's part of a little town called Winchester. And that was from the Winchester Sun, a reader's poll. And some of the stuff I didn't even know. Woohoo! Cindy lives in rural Clark County. Like, she's just getting out of the snowstorm. Are you even out of your driveway yet?
Well, Connie just did a test run, so but I'm coming to yoga tomorrow. Don't worry.
Oh, okay, great. I'm not sure. Yeah,
still a little sketchy out here.
They were iced in. So Cindy lives with her wife and some chickens and a really cute puppy. And she still teaches weekly trauma-informed yoga classes at the Massage Center in Lexington, of which I am a very dedicated attendee when the weather isn't crap here. So lately it's been crap. So welcome, Cindy, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I would love if maybe you could start with just a little background about you and how you got into all this. Maybe tell us a little bit about you personally.
All right. So Lara didn't know a lot of that stuff because it's not like, I've never sent you my CV before. So you didn't know.
Right.
But I met Lara because of yoga, like she said. But so all of this started for me. I was still a late bloomer, and I graduated from UK in 1999 with my first degree. And that was just kind of a sweet spot, as it turns out. I got hired by a community mental health center straight away before I got my license because I'd done a practicum there and they liked me and they were like, hey, there's this place in Powell County where we could sure use your help. So they went ahead and hired me for a job in Powell County where I eventually became the clinical coordinator. So it's 1999, it's 2000, it's 2001. And so they're just sending me to trainings until I get my license, which takes a little minute. And I got this training in this thing called dialectical behavior therapy. So if you want to hear about mindfulness and that's what you're wanting me to talk about. My college degree, I have a master's degree and I'm a licensed psychotherapist. And one of the first trainings they sent me to out the gate was this one called dialectical behavior therapy. And it was one of the first, not the first, clinical application of mindfulness. And it was really big at the time. The author of this, if you're like a geek, like I am, about such things, her name is Marsha Linehan, Linehan. And so she wrote this biopsychosocial theory that included mindfulness for what we now know as complex trauma. Back in the 90s, it was like nothing anybody had ever seen before. And so there was this guy like back in the 70s, Jon Kabat-Zinn, right? And he was in Michigan, at the University of Michigan. and doing mindfulness-based treatments for people that had anxiety and depression. And so Linehan was the first one that really applied mindfulness in this specific way. So I'm out in Powell County and didn't know it. What we know now is it was the opioid epidemic. Real bad. Real bad.
And for you guys that don't know, Powell County is very rural. It's near Red River Gorge, and that it's beautiful, beautiful country. But if nobody's ever watched that documentary on Netflix about the opioid crisis, watch it. It's amazing. It's really, really interesting, and that's where it all was. So
Yeah. So they're like, oh, you'll see like, ADHD or separation anxiety. That is not what I saw when I arrived in the Powell County. So from that, we just started doing DBT, this particular therapy, which was mindfulness based with folks. And a lot of the folks we were working with at the time, because again, we know now what was going on, but we were in it then. We didn't know what was going on. Was a lot of social services clients and stuff like that had certain things that they had to do. And I don't mean to be no way, but people started getting better. It was wild through this mindfulness thing. And so when that starts happening, word of mouth starts kind of happening. And so, so out of grad school, I got a job with my BFF out there in Powell County. Like we met in grad school and blah, blah, blah. And she was a yoga teacher, right? So we're doing this DBT group and individual, and we're like, she takes me to yoga class. And I'm like, this DBT thing is a lot like yoga. It totally is. A lot of the things that we were doing with people just rolling their shoulders or feeling their feet, just a lot of mindfulness-based stuff for complex trauma, right? What I didn't know is up in Boston, there's this guy named Bessel van der Kolk and another guy named David Emerson who were thinking the same thing as we were in Powell County. And so they were developing a whole bunch of evidence-based stuff that really validated the anecdotal stuff that my BFF Jewel and I were seeing in Powell County at the time, which is you do this with folks and they start to get better. So this is a clinical application for mindfulness, and it doesn't help everybody, but it helps a vast majority. So a lot of insurance companies were paying for it at the time. So that's why I got the training, because that's how America works. So there's that. So that's kind of like that's how I got started. So there's a lot of different kinds of mindfulness, lots and lots. What I do is clinical mindfulness for symptom reduction type stuff. Who doesn't have anxiety symptoms? So there you go.
Yeah, true. So that's one thing I've learned from you, Cindy, is that, it doesn't have to be big trauma. We all can have some little trauma or some anxiety that stems from maybe unseen little traumas, but a lot of it, or over time not addressed, can create all kinds of physical and mental symptoms.
Yeah, so anything that you think of as an anxiety symptom, like literally anything under the sun that you could say, if you just think of your top anxiety symptoms, what your body is really doing is preparing you for fight or flight. Full stop. So add a bunch of any ins and whys time that you are experiencing anxiety, you are in fight or flight. So your brain is responding to something it thinks is a threat. So it's just basic fight or flight. So like Lara said, this isn't just for big T trauma. This is for anyone who experiences any kind of anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to talk about Amy. And what I mean by that is not this Amy, but we have another Amy that we talk about. So I knew this would be kind of funny because we joke about an Amy when we talk to Cindy and even like with my daughter now that she knows all this. So I would love to hear a little bit more about the scientific stuff that goes on in the brain, and you'll see what I mean in a minute, Amy.
All right. Well, what Lara's asking for, correct, is like a nutshell of the neuroscience of your emotions, especially your anxiety. Sound good?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So Amy is AMYGDALA, your amygdala. So we just shorten amygdala, which is a part of your brain, to Amy because we talk about her so much. Because your girl Amy's always giving you a solid. I'll say it again. Your girl Amy's always giving you a solid. You might get kind of mad when you feel that anxiety in awkward places and stuff like that. But first of all, we need to make friends with Amy, right, Amy? Yes. Right?
Like the real
So,
Amy.
like, so
Make
here's
friends.
this, make friends. Here's the science. So, whether you've ever thought about this or not, your five senses plus two other senses are your interface with the world, right? Your human interface with world are your five senses, which we all know about. And then there's two more, interoception and proprioception. So proprioception is the sensing of the space around you. Interoception is the sensing of the space inside of you. An example of proprioception is if there's a door behind you and you're facing away from the door and there's a big noise as the door opens, you will turn and look. You won't think, hey, I'm going to turn and look. You won't even notice that you heard a sound. It all happens just like that. That's your girl Amy giving you a solid, using proprioception to keep you safe in the space around you. But it happens before you think, right? Interoception. Proprioception is the space around you, and interoception is the inner sensing of your body, which is why yoga works, which is what a lot of the mindfulness strategies that I offer clinically are about. So this is sensing your breath. So right now, I just would love it if you paused and just gave yourself an inhale and just notice what it feels like. Here's an exhale. Do it again. Just notice that you're inhaling and what it feels like. And an exhale. So interoception, thank you for doing that. Hey, is just noticing things like the inner experience of what the breath feels like when it's lifting on an inhale or falling on an exhale. And so earlier in today's episode, I was like, hey, you want to hear about neuroscience and your amygdala? Your amygdala, Amy, right? She's always checking out what's going on with your five senses plus proprioception and interoception. So what you smell, what you hear, what you see, you're not even aware of this. This is your human interface. And so what I'm explaining is that your amygdala fires first in all human brain activity. So this is serious. Like your whole life, ever since you were born, everything must first go through Amy, the gateway of Amy. She's like the bouncer of the rest of your brain, right? Before you can think. So everybody thinks they're thinking, people. We're feeling people first. And then if everything's given the all clear, then we can think. Okay. So Amy is your amygdala. She is always perceiving everything first. And if something that's happening right now represents danger, she will take control of the wheel, just like the animated feature Disney Inside Out. She will take over the control tower and she will process what you're experiencing. And you will experience what's happening with a little bit of anxiety because she's driving. Okay. How did I do, Lara?
I think you nailed it. From all the stuff I've learned from you, which I think everything I know about mindfulness is probably what I've learned from you. So I use it all the time. I mean, like I said, I've taken a lot of classes and workshops with Cindy, and a lot of yoga classes, which is all the same principles. And I do find myself using it quite often. So thank you for that, for one. But yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot there. And I don't know, you guys might have a question or want to unpack more of any of that. Just Cindy know.
Yeah. I'm happy to talk about how to use this knowledge once you get it. So y'all ask me anything or I'll tell you what to do with this useful tidbit of info.
You guys have any questions so far?
So I'll go. I'm
like, I have so many questions.
You're the curious monkey, Michelle.
So I'll start. I'm the curious monkey. And I'm also like anxiety ridden, right? So all of this really makes lots of sense to me. And, having tried different tools and all of that to manage anxiety over the years, I sort of have lived in a cortisol bath for decades, right? So,
Understood.
Right? So what happens to people who decade after decade live sort of in that space. Like, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, if they don't stumble across, hey, here are some great mindfulness tools, what ultimately is the end game for people?
All right. So mindfulness is super helpful for a lot of people with this. And I'll kind of like walk through how that is. And you're asking like, what's the cumulative effect of being soaked in cortisol for
Yeah.
years and years? So cortisol is one of the chemicals, stress chemicals, hormones that your body produces. So how do I want to explain this? You know, you got your cells in your body. Remember science, cells, permeable, semi-permeable, taking in things, releasing things, cells. Love them, right? So anytime that you are perceiving threat, right, then your body is going to naturally prepare for it's another day of emergency. We're only going to produce the chemicals that we need for emergencies, and we're going to dump all the other ones overboard because it's an emergency. We don't need long-term luxury chemicals. Usually in my work, that's serotonin, for example. That's my wheelhouse, right? But what you're talking about is connective tissue things for the long term of your body and all kinds of autoimmune stuff that we're starting to discover. So there's, again, since I started this in the late 90s, there's been a absolute ton of research about the connectivity of, you know, being soaked in cortisol and the long-term effects of that. So the way that I try to explain it to people, to clients or people in workshops is that if you're in if Amy's reading emergency every single day, then your body will prepare like today's another day of just surviving, as the old saying goes, not living, just surviving. So the cumulative effect can be pretty intense, whether it's serotonin in my case, or like I said, other wheelhouses of medicine that aren't mine. But what I really want to say is that there's hope. So I don't want to be all like, that's true. But any little whittle, that's what I take. If I can take one little shave off of your cortisol level, it's worth it. It's worth it. And I guess the last thing I'll say to your question is I think of cortisol levels in general like a thermostat. And this is an example that I've used in workshops that seems to resonate. So your thermostat runs really, really high if you've been soaked in cortisol for years. So think of it like if we went on vacation in the summer and we forgot to turn the air conditioner on. So when we come home, it's going to take a really long time to get to baseline. Okay. A really long time. So if we keep doing things to kick it on, the stress response, even if we make some resolution, it's still worth it. Any resolution that we get is worth it. And I'll talk some more about how to decrease those cortisol levels with little doses of mindfulness. So, yeah, that's how I do answering your question.
That was great. Thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's I like the thermostat. You know, that is a really easy way to think about it. Yeah. So now do tell. So what are the tips?
Yeah,
I know,
that's
right?
my
Everybody
question.
wants
Like,
to know
Do
the tips.
tell. How
Yeah.
do you what do you work with? Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of like your soaked of cortisol example, I'll
Yep.
just talk about that. So, and the thermostat kind of kicking on when it's set higher. So what I'm really talking about are triggers. So the first thing that we do, whether it's a workshop or I'm working with a client or I'm doing whatever, is right now, whoever's listening to my voice, think of something in your day-to-day life that triggers you, right? Could be your mother-in-law, could be a work situation or Microsoft Excel that triggers me. Like whatever it is, think of something that triggers you. And if you're interested in learning about anxiety, like a regular trigger, right? So the reason that that's triggering for you is, guess what? There's a 99.9% chance that it triggers you because something bad actually did happen related to the trigger. Like you had a real lived experience that was unpleasant or worse regarding that person, that situation, Microsoft Excel, right? So your brain, when it says it's going to start to set off these chemicals, right? Because Amy, if you've never heard of your amygdala, Amy and your amygdala, right, is that she's called your lizard brain. She's not evolved. meaning like she's a lizard from the Galapagos Islands that is still like a dinosaur. And so she does not understand money or the news or anything like this. She just picks up on a threat and gets you ready to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And when you're triggered, that's what's happening, right? So right now I was like, hey, identify something, and I'm repetitive, and Lara knows this. So I'm like, identify something, a trigger, a person, place, or thing. And right now, just as the more that I repeat it and the more I have you think about it, then the next time it happens, you're going to think about this moment that you listen to me talk about it, right? Because we're talking about it and I'm super repetitive because that's my style. So something that triggers you, Amy kicks in because she's a caveman and she doesn't know. She thinks we're in the jungle in the forest, right? What other people
Like a
think
monkey.
about you. Yes, like a monkey. She thinks that what other people think about you might be a threat, right? So as soon as she sets that off, here's what I want you to do. Y'all ready? Take a big deep breath and feel your feet, and I'm serious. So ready? Just take an inhale and feel what it feels like. And so when you take that inhale, like I literally want you to feel what the inhale feels like when it expands in your body, because it does interoceptively, and it falls, right? Feel your feet just for a second. Just feel your feet like you have feet. They exist. And feel yourself seated or wherever you are to gravity, like gravity, your breath, and your feet. Now take a big breath. Gravity, your breath, and your feet. Just notice. So when that trigger presents and you insert one breath where you feel your feet or you feel the breath expanding in your body. Ready for this? Fun fact, you're breathing your whole life, every second of every moment since you were born, but you don't notice it. Your brain filters that out. And so literally, when you shift your brain towards interoception and noticing the sensation of your own breath, it short circuits Amy's message, right? It's basically saying you're in the neurological now. You're in the neurological now. She's trying to connect to whatever threat it is that thing, that trigger, that person, place, or thing represents. But it's not happening now. And when you feel your feet, it's not a thought. Like I said, you feel before you think. So when you feel that interoceptively, it disconnects. Remember when I said it whittles off a little bit of that cortisol and decreases that response. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what you do in the moment with the trigger. How'd I do with that, Lara?
That was great. And I really noticed it because I haven't done, well, we've done a little bit of that, the three of us, just with me. But what I really, really notice is how my shoulders drop and I'm not clenching my jaw. Like sometimes I'm just keyed up for whatever reason. And when I did that little exercise just now, I realized I was kind of not settled in my seat. I wasn't noticing gravity. I felt like a little bit perched. And the minute you had us do the breath and the feeling your feet, and I think now it's like a good trigger for me when I hear you say, feel your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the repetition. And I could feel my shoulders softening and my face relaxing. And I mean, it just like makes me smile. Because let's face it, like you've been doing this a really long time. I've been following you for a long time. And, most people notice it right away. But after you practice for years, it's really amazing.
Yeah. So that's neuroplasticity, which is a super fun thing to talk
Yes,
about.
please talk
So
about neuroplasticity. I love that word and I love the whole concept.
yeah. So what Lara just described is, yeah, she's been practicing with me for a while. And so if let's picture whatever the person, place, or thing is that you just identified, I'm like, think of a trigger, like something that's regularly a trigger for you, right? So whatever that is, whenever you've thought about it before, it generally, like if I was watching your brain on a scan while that happened, it would shoot down a certain way. As soon as I tell you repetitiously, hey, think of that person, place, or thing that's a regular trigger for you that happens all the time. Every time I say that, it's building a little pin. And so the next time that it happens, it's not going to just flow down the same neural pathway that it's always gone on. If me being repetitious and putting it in this pocket for you, this way of thinking about it, it is literally going to create a stop. And a little new neural pathway is going to go bink, just for the opportunity for you to think about this differently. It still might be that you do the same thing again, but even thinking about this conversation creates a difference in the structure of your brain. Okay. So every time you go to it, you think about it again, and whether you do it or not is a little bit, whether you're reactive or not. I try to tell people it's a practice, which is, she said, that's why they call it practicing meditation or practicing yoga. You never achieve it. Like, you're always human and triggers always happen. So another thing that Lara's practiced over the years is mindfulness is not just like in the moment to take that breath and feel your feet, but to use that little pause to continue the neuroplasticity by literally pausing, right? Before you send that email, before you talk to that person, before you do the next thing. One breath counts, but the more triggered you are, the more space, because your Amy's going to compel you, feel like you need to do it right now, because that's how she rolls. And she's always been doing you a solid. Like, she's your fight or flight survive, and she's a cave girl, like Pebbles and Bam Bam, right? From the Flintstones. Like, she's unevolved. So she's going to make you feel like you need to do it right now. You need to verbally attack that person. You need to hide. You need to disappear. She's going to give you all these messages. And the more that you can feel your feet, right? Create space. One breath. I always tell people, how old are you? So I'm 56. 56 minutes, just like timeouts for children, right? If you need a little guideline, 5.6 days, sleep on it. So mindfulness is about one breath. It's about yoga, but it's also about mindfulness in general. One of the definitions is creating space between perception and reaction. And the neuroplasticity means that you change reactivity into responsiveness. Reactivity comes from Amy. Responsiveness comes from your prefrontal cortex.
Love it.
How is that? It gives them a lived experience of being present in their body, a skill like taking a breath or feeling your feet or more. Repetition, neuroplasticity, when people get triggered, the more they do it, the more they're able to come back into presence and feel less triggered by the very real thing that was a threat at some earlier time, whether that was your mother-in-law, Microsoft Excel, or whatever it is. It gives you a way to come back into the present moment, literally. And I repeat it over and over and over again in a yoga class for an hour. So all my yoga stuff comes from David Emerson. If you're interested in the specific kind of training that I offer, or that I offer to Lara and other yoga teachers.
And the locus of control was something too that I feel like is a little bit newer to me until recently. I'm sure I've heard of it, but I've been doing your weekly calls that we do a Zoom call every week with a small group of people, and it's actually getting bigger too, I've noticed. But I just hadn't really thought of things like that before, so maybe you could talk just for a couple minutes on locus of control and what's in the middle in our circle and what's not. So I think a lot of us don't remind ourselves enough about that.
So locus with an S, not with a T, like the bug or the plague. Locus of control. If you Google it, you'll get 10,000 images as results. So locus of control. Let me see. So when you're anxious, most probably it's related to something that is currently or was previously or could be out of control. So when things feel out of control or unpredictable, Amy's like, blip, unpredictable, out of control, let me take the wheel, right? Because that's her job. Totally. Amygdala's job is to process that. So one thing I'm really going to be focusing on, not this week, but next week in the call, Lara, is to use this locus of control to understand, like, we all have a certain amount of cognitive dissonance, meaning we're all going to die. driving a car is dangerous, but we drive the car, even though we know we have a certain amount of cognitive dissonance and we're built for that. But remember, Amy is cave girl. She is not built for the amount of information that we have available to us right now. It's just not working, right? So part of our locus of control is when we feel out of control, you find the thing in the situation that is in your control. Right now, worried about what's happening to immigrants, let me introduce you to the Kentucky Refugee Ministry. They are doing wonderful work right here in this area every day with immigrants, right? So it's about taking something, whatever it is that feels way out of your control, and finding something that you can take action. Because when you're anxious, Amy is generating activation things to try to get you to fight or flee. That's why you feel that way in your body.
Yeah.
When we
So like
feel out of
watching the
control,
news.
the
Yeah.
news.
It's like watching the news makes me feel so anxious, and like you said, now it occurs to me it's because none of that stuff feels like it's in my control.
Yes. So when you Google an image of locus of control, it's going to have a circle in the middle and then stuff outside of it. What is outside of your locus of control are what other people do, what other people say, other people's beliefs, other people's thoughts about you, the future, the past, the results. That's all outside. The weather, as I said. Who gave me balloons?
I don't know what happened.
That was fun.
I don't know.
Yay!
That was fun.
So,
Find out how that works.
in your locus of control, your words, your actions, your beliefs, and the media you consume, that's in your locus of control. Okay. So our brains were built for a certain amount of cognitive dissonance to be able to hold some stuff. But Amy was built for villages. Amy was before the printing press was invented. Okay. Where we just got notices of our local communities and neighbors, right? Not all of the information that we have right now. It's very rough to navigate and to find your own locus of control. So, how'd I do with locus of control, Lara?
Lara, you are muted.
I
We
thought it was
cannot
me.
hear
I was
you.
worried.
Oh yeah, I was muted. Sorry, it's because I don't want to.
Technology's hard for us some days.
Yes, it is. I loved hearing that because it is a little bit newer concept to me. I feel like because I try not to intake too much media because of that, but now that you say it the way you did about how Amy wasn't designed to have this much information coming at her all the time, and so it's natural that when there's that much information, and she's trying to save you or protect you or all that, you're just going to have anxiety, all the time. But if you can just do one little thing that makes you feel like you have control, or something that is within your control, like you said, what you say, what you do, that makes a big difference.
Yes. So getting more familiar with your triggers and what about it that feels out of control. We've been talking a lot too about just these kind of in-between times. That's really hard for Amy. Like when something has happened, but you think something else is going to happen. She really, really responds and uncertainty, need my help. You know what I mean? So to have different ways in which you're familiar with what is in your locus of control. And I know it sounds really trite about like the media you consume. I mean, it seems like I'm really like being super fluffy, but girl, I'm serious. Like we all have to get more discerning for ourselves. There was a time in which, watching the news or knowing the news was part of good citizenship or whatever. Like it's something they taught you, and it's the horse has left the barn, as they say in Lara's old career, I reckon. I don't know. Like it's way past that, and we're not built for this. And so, know yourself, understand your triggers, and understand that you do have an ability to, make decisions about what's in your locus of control. So, love.
I love that. Yeah, that was good. You guys have anything? Amy or Michelle? I know Michelle and I are under the weather, so we're not our normal, bright, talkative selves today. Amy, I don't know what your excuse is.
I'm just taking it all in because you guys know that of the three of us who need the most help, who like this is out of my world. And Lara and Michelle know this, but like I'm the girl that will go run for a bazillion miles, but to sit still and like try to focus on my feet, I'm like, no,
Yeah.
girl needs to move.
Okay. That's
So what
wonderful.
help do you have for those of us like me?
No, you are helping yourself. So it's really weird. So I do coaching, private coaching, and I coach someone that's a runner and they are like a marathon runner. It's really weird, but I coach them for mindfulness, like for real. And she
Yeah.
tagged me in a post on Instagram and I got all of these runners like asking to follow me. And I'm like, what is happening? You haven't met me, but I am not a runner. So at all. But it's again, it doesn't have to be sitting still and feeling your feet. I used to work with this guy who was sporty spice, kind of guy. And he would have people do squats, but it's inhale, exhale, exhale down, inhale up, inhale. And when you're running, I know that you've got to be paying attention to your breath. When you're running, feel your feet hit the ground. When you're running, notice what's going on around you. Do sensory counting. So that's running. Swimming, other great one, clearly. Breath, so anything that is rhythmical attunement, like that. So rhythmical attunement is a very clinical blah, blah, blah. But that's what, if you notice another thing about yoga, when you're in the class, everybody's inhaling up and exhaling down and everybody's doing the same thing, at the same time. So running is the same thing. I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's not all seated meditation for reals. People do really well integrating mindfulness, anxiety, and running together. So my only tip to you is to consciously run if you're anxious. If you unconsciously run when you're anxious and you're just like running through all the crap in your head that's anxious or that you're worried about, if you want to do mindfulness and running, then when you're running, run. Use your sensory, the proprioception and interoception the whole time that you're running. And people do really well with it. It's weird.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but it works apparently for people's running careers.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking of that because Amy's also a trail runner. And so, like, you have to be super mindful about where you're putting your feet when you're running through a forest trail.
Absolutely.
It doesn't go well sometimes.
No, does not.
So
I've seen those injuries.
You're already practicing it without even realizing it, probably.
Yeah.
Yes. If you're feeling anxious and you combine that mindfulness real clearly with your running, whatever running does for you dopamine wise, it'll be a boost.
Yeah.
I think when the first, I don't even remember when the first mindfulness went, John Kabat-Zinn maybe was my first toe dip in or whatever. But I think whoever it was talked about mindfulness as sort of bringing that awareness to, like, when you're washing, just like you said to Amy, like when you're washing the dishes, just wash the dish. Is that Thich Nhat Hanh maybe? Like when you wash the dishes, when you carry the water, when you cut the wood, if you're cleaning the litter, the kitty litter, be present and mindful when you're doing those things. And that,
yes,
is that, kind of
that
what
is
you're
so
talking.
much that is like literally a handout that we were giving people in like 2001 in Powell County, like everything that you just said, like when you wash the dishes. So John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness definition, and you said Thich Nhat Hanh. So both of those people were Thich Nhat Hanh and John Kabat-Zinn were who Marsha Linehan, that I was studying at the time clinically with, was citing. So when she made those handouts, it was a blend of exactly those two people that she was conveying this. So John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness definition is paying attention to what is occurring in the present moment on purpose without judgment. So John Kabat-Zinn is paying attention to what is occurring in the present moment on purpose without judgment. So the on purpose is when you're running, run. When you're washing the dishes, wash the dishes. And it's also conveying a discrete period of time, discrete meaning it has a beginning and an end. So no one is mindful all the time. Not a thing.
Right.
Picking a place to practice, whether it's yoga class, washing the dishes, walking from your door to the car. If you have a cue, making coffee is another one that was on those handouts. Things that you can, there's a perception to it. Washing dishes and coffee have a smell. It has a sensation when you're washing the dishes. So it's all sensory stuff that they were talking about that's really exploited in the kind of mindfulness I use. So yes,
That was
exactly.
perfect. Well, and
Mhm.
Amy, too, I think about your eating mindfully. Eating mindfully is a big deal. Like a lot of people don't do that. I catch myself not doing it all the time. And
Yep.
I have to stop and just say, I don't even know what I just ate, and it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I talk to people about that all the time because we're so like, have a phone or some sort of screen or, doing something, driving, all of that.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah. Other than just
just,
mindfully paying attention to your food and the chewing, and
mhm,
you're not getting enjoyment out of your meal if you're not mindful about it.
yeah. Yeah, and then just
Exactly.
tend to overeat and you
Yeah.
don't even
And
realize
overeat.
you're full until you're like over
Yeah.
stuffed.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So much good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, like it's it's easier too when you hear all these different um, ways you can apply mindfulness. It's easier to imagine working it into your day to day. And that's another thing like we strive to do when we do our little podcast is, we want to share these little wellness tips whenever even if it's, we try to have fun and laugh on here too. But honestly, like if one person can take away something from this, then that's huge. So I really appreciate you
You
being
know
on.
how I feel about it.
I know you're.
I think one of the things, and thank you, Cindy, so much for joining us and just great information. But one of my big challenges is always, you know, it's not the not knowing, right? It's the doing, right? It's the execute. So I really appreciate the reminder because the anxiety piece, even though I know this, right? To hear it from maybe it's a good reminder that just to expose yourself to folks who are working in the space, or take the course, even though you're like, oh, I know about mindfulness, well, clearly I know, and clearly I'm not doing it, right? So there has to be, yeah, I'm really glad we did this, because it is just a good reminder and ways to build it in. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, we've definitely heard lots of things about you. So it's good to finally
Yeah.
good to
Yeah, and
finally meet
that
you
was
kind
such
of.
a
Yeah.
nutshell view. I mean, there's so much more, but um and yeah, and I really appreciate you coming on. And I didn't know if you wanted to close with any other little mindfulness things for us, or if you had any last thoughts before we sign off.
Um,
That was great. And I was thinking about that quote about between stimulus and response. And I know Amy, the real Amy, knows that quote too. So maybe you could. I never get it quite right, but I know you know it.
Yeah, it's something. It's the Viktor Frankl one, but I'm not gonna get it exactly right either unless I look it up. But yeah,
between, yeah.
go ahead.
Do you know it? Let's play Viktor Frankl
Yeah,
trivia.
it's
What
like,
Viktor
yeah,
Frankl?
something like between stimulus and response. But yeah, I don't know. I can't think of what it is exactly, but
Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom.
yes, there we go. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
great.
I love it.
So, the mindfulness I offer just exploits your five senses, sensory counting, right? That's another one if you've not done that. Feeling your feet, feeling your breath, just creating that space between stimulus and response by hacking it using what we know now that the yoga people's known forever, but they just didn't have evidence-based stuff, but now we do.
Yeah.
Thanks to Marsha Linehan and other people who've done research on this. It's great.
Yeah, so maybe talk a little bit about yoga and mindfulness and how really the yogis of, ancient yoga history, probably have been doing this the whole time. And like you said, we just didn't know that it had a scientific basis.
Yeah, so I was super blessed to be, as weird as it is, to be dropped in this particular part of the world. And you might not think this is a hotbed for yoga love, but it totally is. It really is in the area that I happen to be in. So my teacher studied with Mr. Iyengar, who's a very famous yoga person, right? He died a few years ago, over 100 years old. He's the one that brought yoga, over here long time ago. So this person named Judith Lasater, if you want to, Lasatar, ER. She is a wonder. She's written lots of books. She's been around since the 60s and 70s, and she studied with my teacher, so I was linked into her pretty quickly. So right away, I just did a training with her. This is why I'm telling you this. So I just did a training with her this past spring. And the thought that I trained with her in the early 2000s, I'm just so blessed, because she said back then that one of the ancient yoga sutras says, sensation is the teacher of presence. Sensation is the teacher of presence. And it's totally weird, because what did I just say? Like, feel your feet, feel gravity, feel your breath, because that takes your brain into neurological presence. So again, that's been in texts forever. And just to hear her say it again, I was like, it was mind blowing, really, that they've been saying this all along, and now it's true. So yeah, so like we got out of college, like we end up in Powell County. Here we are with these people. And we're having them roll their shoulders and do all of this stuff. And so that, just like y'all, I mean, it makes everybody, or most everybody, it's not for everyone, but most people feel really good and really relaxed, because my cue in yoga or in these classes was always back to the neurological now, where your body literally is relaxed. Okay. So we were using these cues and we were doing these things. And so fast forward, I was working at the Bluegrass Rape Crisis Center and had been teaching yoga and was pretty known for teaching yoga clinically already. And so they gave me a very small amount of money, like very small, and said, here's a grant to start trauma-informed yoga for our 17 counties. It was a very small amount of money. So at that point, which was about 2016, I could train one person, or I could build a training in Lexington myself, which is what I did with that money. Because then you had to go places. You had to go to Seattle. So instead, I decided to build the training myself with that small amount of money. And from that, my original goal was in the 17 counties that we serve, that I was going to access other clinical people and give them the same information I just gave you about how this is an intervention that works for most people. And then I started out with a pilot group where we started a training for other yoga teachers. And then we just repeated that and repeated that. Okay. So, what about yoga? I don't know how to say. If you read, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, for sure. Mm-hmm. And if you want to learn more about the specific kind of yoga that I do, there's a book called Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga by a gentleman named David Emerson. And he worked in cohort with Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. So his is the yoga research that goes alongside the research in The Body Keeps the Score. And so the type of yoga that I offer comes from van der Kolk's definition of PTSD being a disorder of not being present, right? So if the whole hour, ask Lara, if you're in yoga with me for an hour, it's just feel your feet, you're standing up, you're upside down, you're on one leg, but it's all, where are you in the room? Where's gravity? Where's your foot? Feel your breath for an hour. And so neuroplasticity wise, that gives people, it makes everybody feel good, even if you have just garden variety anxiety or full on PTSD. For most people, to have a lived experience for a whole hour where your amygdala, Amy, goes on break, and then you can reorient yourself. So one of the things we talk about is locus of control. I talk about it a lot. So when people say they have control issues, what they really mean is they have locus of control issues. So things that are in my locus of control versus outside my locus of control. Outside my locus of control is the weather, right? Inside my locus of control is an umbrella, right? So stuff like that. So people who have anxiety or PTSD, thank you for saying that I offered real ways to practice this stuff by tying it to a specific trigger that I was repetitive about. And I'm doing it again. To pair it with things that you do already, just so that if I say it again, like washing dishes, making coffee, walking from the door to the car, running, the next time, it just to have ways and cues to practice things that you know, and new lenses to look at it through. Always good.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to do whatever it is you want me to do later. I can whoop out something else or not, whatever you need.
Yeah, well, what do you guys say to closing out with just a very short, less than 5 minutes mindfulness practice? I know sitting still is hard, but we can do it with Cindy and see what we think.
I can talk about sitting still is hard while I do it too. Huh?
Yeah, let's do it.
How's that?
Okay, I
All
think
right.
we're game, and then we can sign off.
Okay, so if you're willing, just get comfortable in your chair, like for reals. Like make a little adjustment so that you could get just this much more comfortable from where you were. And then if you're willing, just take your hands and rest them on your legs, whatever way makes sense based on the way that you're seated. And then do me a favor and shrug your shoulders up and touch your earlobes like you look sometimes in the afternoons. And then widen your collarbones and keep your shoulder blades moving back till they almost touch. And then let your shoulder blades drop down your back so there's tons of room between your shoulders and your earlobes. Letting your hands rest on your legs. The next time that you inhale, if 0 was nothing and 10 was everything, give me a 1 with your abs. Just a little bit of abs. So now we can notice the breath. Make it look like if somebody saw you that you were looking straight ahead, but with your face forward, let your eyes look down. As you notice the breath, notice that your core is lightly engaged. As you notice the breath, notice that your collarbones are wide, your shoulders far away from your ears. If it's okay with you and your constitution to let your lips touch but not your teeth, so you could breathe in through your nose. If it's not okay to close your mouth, still try to on an inhale. Inhale in through your nose and feel it all the way down into your feet. So now just breathing normally, knowing that breathing in through your nose, if possible, gives you a little bit of extra nitric acid, which is good for clarity of thought. We're seated together and you're breathing. Whenever your mind wanders off, come back to the breath. That is the practice. You might have noticed that when your inhale comes, she lifts and rises, and the skin of your belly lifts a little bit. And when you exhale, the exhale falls and the skin of your body drops a little, and there's a little pause before the inhale comes again. Notice the sensation of the breath. Notice gravity and your seated posture. The next time you inhale, when you inhale, see if you can feel the inhale in your feet. Noticing the breath. Next exhale. Exhale, just let your head drop forward, letting your chin drop in towards your chest. When your head is heavy and forward, not forcing your chin into your chest, just let your head be heavy, and when you inhale, feel the inhale in the back of your neck. Now, I know there's a million things to think about, but just notice that inhale in the back of your neck. Next time you inhale, inhale your sweet face back to facing forward. Letting your eyes open. This is the end of this exercise. The end. Namaste.
Namaste.
How was that?
That was nice. I needed that. How do you guys feel?
Love that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can get some more of this. I'm available in public yoga classes all the time. Just like Lara, you'll be loving yoga in no time. Even the runners. Come on down.
Yeah, and
Okay?
she can go. She's on Zoom with the classes too. The yoga classes are on Zoom through the massage center in Lexington.
Yep.
So you can come from wherever you are.
Come on down. I do free classes all summer too. Summer. Remember that?
Oh,
So I do free
yeah.
classes in the summer. Lara will tell you all about it. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cindy. Thanks for listening to Monkey Chatter today. As a reminder, we want to let you know that while we think we are really smart, none of us are doctors or medical professionals. So anything that we say or suggest on this podcast should be run by your doctor before you make any major lifestyle, nutrition, or medication changes. Take care and be well, friends.